Hello friends, Namaste, Namo Buddhaya. Now, before I spoke about, in the last talk, a little about the Buddha's words to encourage a sense of urgency about our practice, specifically bhikkhus, how time marches relentlessly on. Bhikkhus, how well are you spending your time? Now that applies to all of us, of course, not just bhikkhus, lay people too. How well are we spending our time? If it's in the practice of Sila, moral virtue, samadhi, meditation, and panya, developing wisdom, or the reduction of unwholesome mind states, and the increase of wholesome mind states, then we are following the Noble Eightfold Path and spending our time productively, not in the sense of achieving materialistic results, but achieving our goal towards eventually freedom from suffering in this lifetime. And that can only come about as a result of the reduction or the negation of desire. Desire, coming from the root defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion, is that is responsible for all of our unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, suffering. We have anicca, these are the characteristics of existence. Anicca, impermanence or uncertainty; dukkha, suffering, often translated as, or unsatisfactoriness; and anatta, not self, uncontrollable. Even these bodies are not ours. In that sense, we cannot control them. We cannot say, heart beat faster, heart beat slower. We cannot say, don't have pain there. Please, pain go away. It's there. These bodies are just our vehicles for transportation, the means to practice acts, good acts of body, speech and mind throughout this lifetime, as well as, of course, unwholesome acts of body, speech and mind. And it is those we try to avoid by encompassing, embracing and taking upon ourselves these simple rules, the 5 precepts of refraining from killing, refraining from stealing, refraining from sexual misconduct, refraining from lying, and refraining from intoxicants. So these aren't things we have to do, just simply refrain from. Just don't do that. You know, it's quite easy not to do something, isn't it? If you look at it like that, to go and do something requires thought, planning, action, the process of doing, and then the consequences. Refraining from doing something, refraining from killing, just that. No need to do anything. Now, the samana life, the life of a monk, the life of a renunciant, is all about making it possible for us to practice more, consistently, but it makes it our only occupation. Our practice, our lives become very simple. We have 1 meal a day, and the rest of the time is really dedicated to the practice of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. To support this, we expand our rules to a huge number of rules, it seems, 227. But essentially, the body of those rules is to support the 8 precepts, which also lay people can take whenever they like, but often take on the Uposatha days, the Buddhist holy days, the full moon and new moon, and even on the quarter moons, when they can take the 8 precepts, which slightly adapt the 5 precepts in taking the 3rd precept to mean celibacy rather than refraining from sexual misconduct, so no sexual activity whatsoever. The 6th and additional precept is to not eat in the afternoon. The 7th is to not bother with. So again, it's refraining from beautification, adornments, wearing of jewelry, perfume, makeup, putting on your hair and your best clothes. Often in monasteries, people will come and they'll wear some simple white pajama kind of outfit, to just be very simple. Men look the same as ladies, upasakas. Everyone looks quite nondescript. You don't have to go to the lengths of shaving your head, as the monk does, as a further sign of renunciation, but you are really taking the approach that it doesn't matter what you look like, as long as you're clean and tidy, you are good enough for the practice. And then finally, the 8th precept is to just not sleep in a high bed, luxurious bed is the wording. But this means to not have such comfort like sofas and big comfy chairs and big comfortable beds that you would laze about, really massaging that sort of comfort desire we have, which is also insatiable. If you notice, however comfortable your bed is, do you stay still all night whilst you're asleep? No, you're continually moving, trying to keep the body moving and the blood flowing in different places. Whereas you sit in meditation on a hard floor like this, I don't have these cushions, I don't think you can see those, I just like to sit on the floor. If you're upright, in a balanced posture, you can actually sit without your blood stopping anywhere or going numb for a very long time. You'll notice I don't move during these talks. I don't get up and stretch my legs or change my position, my posture. It isn't necessary. I'm waving my arms about considerably, but that's part of my way. So this is what can be done to support this practice, both as lay people and as monks, as the further rules 227 imply. There are further renunciations. I forgot to mention in the 8 precepts there, coming under number 7, is also refraining from entertainment. So we don't sit looking at our phones watching some form of entertainment, music or movies, and I think really even indulging in idle conversation on whatever social media things are popular today is unnecessary also, and certainly a distraction from the practice of developing wholesome mind states, because you can go off at such tangents with conversation. So this is also avoided and not allowed in the monasteries. Often they'll say, please leave your phone in the office. And this also creates for a more peaceful, undisturbed atmosphere. Now, I touched upon this life of a samana, a monk, a wandering ascetic, or at least coming from the original idea of a wandering ascetic pre the Buddha, whom then adapted it to more the middle path. So less tapas, very austere practices to try and burn away those root defilements of greed, hatred and delusion, and more of an approach, a wise approach of following the Noble Eightfold Path. So right view, establishing right view firstly. This is the 4 Noble Truths and the characteristics of existence, of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and not self. Establishing that right intention. So to have the intention to practice and any intention to do anything unwholesome, to really refrain from that. Right speech, and I've already touched upon that also, speaking truthfully and at the right time and kindly and helpfully and coming from experience. Right action, all of the actions of body, speech and mind, which I've just touched upon also, all good actions, because karma means action, and every action of body, speech and mind we do is going to be the cause of consequences. It will have results. It will bear fruit. So if we do good, it will bear fruit of a good nature. If we do bad, then the opposite is true. So we know this from our own experience already, and sometimes we think, well, I don't know, I did this bad, I got away with it. We all know that even if it doesn't catch up with you, it's in the back of your mind. It may be no way you've done something bad in the past, no one's going to ever find out, you'll never be caught. It's still, it's in the back of your mind. So you have this fear, this dread of it catching up. So there, and immediately you can see there is a consequence. We actually call this Hiri and Ottappa. Hiri and Ottappa are our guardian angels, really. They are the fear of breaking our precepts, and then the dread of the consequences of breaking our precepts. So with these two constantly in our mind, you could call it conscience. With this conscience, we are reluctant to break those simple precepts and more happy to refrain from doing those things that are going to cause ourselves harm or others harm. The 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, however many precepts, are there in order to really do one thing, ensure one thing, that you do yourself no harm and no other beings any harm. You become harmless. And this is giving the greatest gift you can give to other beings. Because if you are harmless to yourself and all other beings, you are giving the gift of fearlessness to other beings. They no longer fear you. Snakes won't attack you because they're more frightened of you, and the only reason they attack when you're walking through the forest is because you've accidentally trodden on one, or they see you coming and they fear you're coming for them. If you're walking nicely without any thoughts of animosity towards other creatures, only loving kindness in your mind, most animals will just get out of your way and try and avoid you. Only when you're encroaching on their territory, their family, their children, or their food supply, will they then approach this with defense. But of course, if you're keeping the precepts and you're keeping this quality, this mental quality of loving kindness within you, this practice, metta we call that, then you will not be offering any threat to any other beings, so they won't harm you. So everything goes round in circles and is self-fueling. It's like that, this practice. What you begin with, you end up with, and it goes round in circles. So it's easier to remember the way forward when you know the beginning. And the beginning is always Sila. Now, I touched upon the first stage of enlightenment, Sotapanna, with regards to the abandonment of rites and rituals, which is very much part of this tapas practice that I've mentioned with regards to, say, burning of fires and flames and worshipping and praying, and really hoping and superstition and wishing that something from above, a higher power, a god or a object, will protect you, will bring you good fortune, will do all of these things for you. Well, the Buddha taught us this is not the truth. But even if it is the truth, you don't have to deny, and I don't ever deny the existence of God's other realms, because who am I to know? I don't know, so I cannot deny something I know nothing about. But I choose not to put my trust in that. I choose not to adopt rites and rituals and prayer, for instance, which is just a request. Praying, it just means asking. I don't ask God, I don't ask a statue or anything for help or assistance, and Buddhists shouldn't, because we are learning through this practice, through this Noble Eightfold Path, that it's only ourselves that can protect ourselves. Only we can protect ourselves and protect others, if they so want us to. But it's not through asking of something we can only imagine to be there, whether it's there or not. If we look after ourselves and it is there, then they will only be too pleased that you are looking after yourselves. If you neglect to look after yourself, they're not going to be so disposed to look after you. So if there is a God, then he's going to say, well, why should I look after you? You haven't looked after yourself. You're just relying on me. I'm sure he would say, come on, you do some good, you look after yourself, and then I'll help you along the way. Okay? So this is rites and rituals, and then also I touched upon, what was the other thing I touched upon? Doubt, of course. So if we have doubt in the Four Noble Truths, if we have doubt in the Noble Eightfold Path, you've got to really go back to the beginning. Now this is why I continuously repeat in every talk, I must say, Sila, samadhi, panya, moral virtue, meditation, wisdom. Every talk I say, anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and everything's out of our control. Why? Because it's so important. That is the Buddha's teachings. Really, he just taught one thing, there's suffering. And then it's expanded through his compassion for us to mortals, mere mortals, to really understand to the Four Noble Truths. There's a cause of suffering, and that there's an end of suffering, nirodha. And then there's this path leading to the end of suffering, and then he breaks it down, how to live, these instructions for life, the Noble Eightfold Path. So simple, isn't it? And then that can be just separated into three categories of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. So that's why I'm always repeating that, and I don't get bored of hearing it and repeating it to myself either, because everything can be answered by those things. Any question you ask me, the answer is Sila, Samadhi, Panya. It may be phrased differently. The Buddha spoke, there are 84,000 suttas, all teaching the same thing, there's suffering and an end of suffering. But to different people, different contexts, different environments, and different times now we're talking about. Everything has to be adapted. So with a little adjustment, Sila, Samadhi, Panya answers most questions. But if the reason isn't how should I do something, but it's more why did it happen, the question, then it can be answered with anicca, dukkha, anatta. Well, because it's impermanent. Why did this person die? Because nothing is permanent. All conditioned things are impermanent. Well, why am I so upset? Because you are hoping it will be otherwise. So it's very unsatisfactory. And why did they not live as long as this person? Now, this is remarkable. They wait until I'm giving a talk before they turn the water on here. This is uncontrollable. To some extent, that is controllable. I'll have to go and let them know. Hold on, sorry, excuse me, this happens every time. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Seems that we can have no water for 3 days. They wait for me to start speaking and they turn the water on. And it is a case, if the water's there, I have to get it from the well with a bucket. But India. Incredible India, as they say. So we practice towards becoming free from suffering in this lifetime. And the first stage of enlightenment towards that we call sotapanna. I touched upon this saying about rites and rituals and then doubt. And of course, if you have any doubt, then you need to go back to the very beginning. As I was talking about before that little interruption, reminding ourselves of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, anicca, dukkha, anatta. So at least it gives me a chance to break and reflect back on what I've said so far. The third aspect of that initial stage of enlightenment is the abandonment of personality view. Personality view or ego, okay, our own perception of the opposite of anatta. Anatta means not self. A is always not self. So anatta is, so nata would be self, this personality that we believe is our character or our ego, what we are, our identity. I am a man, I am a monk, I live in India, I am 56, I come from England, or whatever we make it to be. However, take that example. A few weeks ago, I was a man, I lived in Thailand, I was still a monk, and I still came from England, I was 55. So all of these things, even in that sense, are changing. Now we may have the same causes and conditions around us all of the time that will support the construction, if you like, the conditions, the causes and conditions for a certain type of personality, a person that we identify with and believe is ourselves. Now, it is one of those three aspects towards becoming a sotapanna. The first, Sakkaya Ditthi, the abandonment of personality view, is that. It is knowing that this is not what we are. This is just a result of causes and conditions which are surrounding us. And those causes and conditions are a result of our previous actions up to now, or karma. So, my actions up to now have been very much about the practice, which has, of course, led me to becoming a monk, living in India, then Thailand, and now India, and to some extent, a lot of moving around. Now, my point to this was just having covered that other aspect of the first stage of enlightenment, sotapanna. My point to this was the wandering monk, the samana, which isn't so common in other parts of the world these days for many good reasons and practical reasons, is as a result of, if you think of a nomadic existence, someone mentioned this word, wanderlust, to me, wanderlust. I don't know why I have difficulty saying it, because you've got wander, W-O-N-D, wonder, W-O-N-D-E, and then wander, W-A-N-D-E-R. So wander, lust, is this lust which is really unwholesome desire. Desire, we have two kinds. Tanha, which is like thirst or craving, and chanda, which is a wholesome desire. So the desire to meditate this afternoon for 3 hours in samadhi is chanda, because that's a wholesome act of body, speech and mind, and only does good. But the real desire to go out and eat pizza and chips and watch a movie is tanha, because that is to satisfy thirst, craving, desire for a thirst and a desire that is insatiable, unsatisfiable, because the more you have, the more you want. Even if you have sufficient to really be fed up of that thing and make yourself feel quite, sick of it, or listen to the same piece of entertainment or music over and over again until you don't want to ever hear it again, it builds up the causes to want more of something similar soon after or later on. But it's always building more thirst, more craving. This is tanha. So, what was I saying? So we're looking to reduce tanha first. I've forgotten where we got to now. Desire. Now we need another water break. Because the water's stopped and I'm now hearing this beautiful silence of this very beautiful place, if it wasn't for them trying to mechanize everything. I don't know why they do this. I mean, to get the water up to this tank is such an effort with an electric pump, and so much involved in a place that rarely has electricity. just leave it in the well. I've had to go 6 times back and forth to the well already this morning, so now it's rather too late to put it up there, but never mind. This is part of travelling around. And wanderlust is coming from that idea, lust, to have new experiences by wandering. So people would say travel, and you see many travel vlogs, travel things on the YouTube channels that are very, very popular, because it's really great, because even if you can't do it yourself, you can see other people going from country to country, doing all these different things. I mean, I travel a lot and could do that, but I choose not to. I sit in just one room and talk like this. But if I was to show you different restaurants, of course, as a monk, I'm not going to the same places, but I still see some wonderful things. But I rarely, if ever, take a photograph or even a video. It's very seldom that anything. What you see on here is what it amounts to in terms of my recording anything that I'm experiencing, because this is not why I'm traveling. Now, it's very good to have wanderlust and to be able to travel, but it generally is this desire to have experience through travel, but with a home base to return to, and then continue, and then you travel again. Now, the wandering ascetic, the samana of old, the sadhu of today, and the tudong, or monk, is how it's referred to in Thailand, or a Dutanga monk, which is where that tudong word comes from. Dutanga, there are 13 ascetic practices the Buddha allowed to remain. I won't go into them all now, that's for another talk, but one of them is to just wander, not live anywhere. Living at the foot of a tree, in a cave, in the open air, or in an abandoned building. Those 4 places, don't you see, include the monastery that we know of today. Now, I'm a Dutanga monk because I don't actually ever live in one particular monastery. I haven't ever. I have my requirement that I'm tied to the main monastery and keep returning for the Uposatha recitations every 15 days. But in the interim period, I am wandering. And even from country to country, where I have to change that tie to another monastery. But I've been wandering. The longest I've spent in one place was in Thailand, where they're more strict. Seeing as Tudong comes from there, it's unusual. It's become more now an expedition. You go as part of your practice from A to B, 2 weeks, 10 days, 14 days, or 3 months, or a year even, on Tudong, as a separate thing to living in a monastery. But for some monks, and for myself, I'm always on Tudong. I'm always a Dutanga monk, or Kamatana monk, they will often say. This is a working monk. I'm working the practice, moving around. Now, why am I moving around? Is it through lust? Is it through desire to see new things? Actually, it's not. If I have any desire or any lust, it is actually to just settle down in one place, like my banyan tree graveyard over there, which was perfect until the torrential forces of water decided they were going to undermine me. I managed to prevent the rain from above, but the rain I didn't expect can also come by way of a river underneath your little tent or flimsy tent, so mosquito net, thus avoiding the tarp protection, the plastic sheet protection, and soaking me, and meaning I had to beat a hasty retreat. But this sort of condition, these places and these experiences show you that it is also very difficult to just stay in one place unless you are part of an established community, a monastery that is built up and then has an infrastructure. You have people with duties, people with responsibilities. There are things to maintain, look after, clean, fix, mend. Like here, all of this, there's just 4 monks. Well, no, they're not monks. There's 2 novices and an anagarika and a kapya, a layperson. All of the work that's involved just to maintain their existence, which it does not really apply to one wandering lone monk, whom can get their 1 meal a day and their water for the day, and that is all that's necessary. Then other than that, just to find some shelter for the night, and if you're ill, the required medicine. And these four requisites are usually available wherever you are, even if you're not in a Buddhist country. Now, this kind of wandering is nomadic wandering. If you think of the nomads of this world that are usually herding, farming types. So they're people who have a flock of sheep or a flock of cows, and rather than living in one place, they're moving their flock continuously. Now, this is not for the traveling experience. It's because they're grazing new ground. They're getting their sustenance from moving. And eventually they'll come full circle and go back probably to the same spot. But the grass has grown and they're continuing and nomadic. This is where nomad existence or nomadic existence comes from. Now, the wandering ascetic, the samana, the renunciant monk, myself, is wandering for that. Not to seek new experience from different places, although that is part of one of the bonuses. That is part of the experience, for sure. But without one secure base to return to, whether or not that is sufficient compensation for most people, never to know where you will be next week. The only time of year I know where I will be is this 3 months, when it is in our rules as monks, we stay in this one place. And it's this time also I have a great deal of time to reflect upon what to do next. Now, I could, as I could have last year, just stayed where I was. Then you become more part of the community, and there's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of people practice very well with that. But as soon as you are in one place for a amount of time, these places are generally growing. Because, as I often mentioned, humanity's tendency towards complication, it's never that acceptable. Like, for instance, here, they've got shelter, they've got a well, water, and there's food, plentiful food. Medicine if they need it, and robes, you know, they've got the requisites. But that's not good enough. They're having to build, they've got this little temple, which is very nice. They're build kitchens, kutis, pumps for water and electricity in order to support more monks staying. At the moment, they're struggling they can't get water to my bathroom. So this is all effort. This is all contrary, not part of the Noble Eight. It's all right, it's all good, nothing wrong with it, but it's not 100% focused on the practice. So one also starts to develop a position, a role in life, and this becomes also part of personality, part of self. Oh, I am the guest monk. I am the one who fixes the electrics. I am the one who fixes the water. I am the cooking. I am the one who supervises the cooking. You fall into categories. And again, we're all practicing with the same Sila, the same 227 rules. We're all practicing Sila, Samadhi, Panya. And if you like community life, and that being a part of that, then that is ideal also and conducive to your practice, because you still have a lot of time for meditation. And maybe more time for meditation than if you're a wandering ascetic who is having to find a suitable tree, a suitable empty hut, a cave, or the open air to spend the time for his abiding, for his time to sit in practice each and every day, moving on. But I look at it as that nomadic experience. Rather than looking for something, I'm continually moving myself, not for new experience, but to maintain this experience, this practice, my practice of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, consistently, each and every day, does require me to move from time to time, continuously. Why? If I'm continuously moving, each day is a new day. I wake at 3. I start meditating. As the sun comes up, I go at 6 o'clock, find food. I eat, I practice. Nothing else will interrupt me from then until when the sun goes down. And that I can do anywhere, subject to certain conditions to do with weather, mainly. But even so, we're very resilient with these bodies. We can withstand quite dramatic extremes of temperature. So Asia's a very good part of the world. At this time of year, not so good because of the rain, but this is exactly why we have the Vassa, this time of 3 months staying in one place. And on my reflection, do I want to stay in one monastery in one place? I'll probably move on to somewhere after this Vassa, and where yet is undetermined. Even if I make a plan, let's say I plan to go to Sri Lanka next. Who knows? I might not survive this Vassa. I might not breathe my next breath. You see, anicca, dukkha, anatta. We are not in control of these bodies, or this, what we call self. It is only as a result of causes and conditions. Now, if I've put in the right effort, the right practice, and created the right causes and conditions, hopefully the opportunity will arise for me to travel, because of course to travel outside of this country requires a little more effort than to stay within the country, mostly. Financially, I'm fortunate that before I became a monk, I did set up a sort of supportive trust for emergencies. Not so much emergencies, but regularities, let's say. Every so often, if you're staying in foreign countries, you're not allowed to stay there any longer. Your visa runs out, so you have to go to another country. And this generally involves a flight. So before I ordained, I made sure there was sufficient resources for that purpose only. Not to have money to spend or to travel, but to facilitate the transportation between countries when visas expire, and also the cost of visas. Also repatriation, should I require to go back to the UK for medical treatment if I was seriously ill, or even if I was dead and my body was needed to be taken out of one country and flown back to my own. So it's a kind of, all it is a kind of insurance in trust, if you like, to trustees who do handle money, who can pay for various things like that is required by me in this day and age. But of course, in the olden days, this wasn't the case. You just wandered as far as you can. You could take the Silk Road and go from one side of China right down to Italy, through many, many countries, along like a motorway from east to west. Imagine that. And yes, there were obstacles on the way, probably more fearsome than customs and excise, or more fearsome than immigration. And it was probably harder than flying from, say, China to Italy than it is these days. But there was this route in place. But they catered, they worked around it, they dealt with it, they were able to do it. If that wasn't possible, then Buddhism wouldn't have reached China, it wouldn't have reached all of these outlying districts all around the world that it eventually got to after the Buddha said to his bhikkhus, like, right, now you go in the 4 directions, north, east, west, and south, and Dhammadutta, you take this message of the Dharma, my teachings, around the world. Not to preach, not to proselytize, but to just, when people see that 4th heavenly messenger, as I mentioned in the previous talk, the samana, the wandering ascetic, the monk, and they say, hey, what are you about? You can just say, I'm a Buddhist monk. And they say, well, what's that? What's the point of view? Well, I'm content. I'm aiming to become free from suffering in this lifetime. How are you going to do that? Well, I need little. So I eat little, sleep little, I talk little, I expect nothing. I've reduced expectations. I've reduced desire down to the minimal amount necessary for survival. And therefore I'm content with very little. And this is moving towards the end of suffering. And this is that message we pass on as wandering ascetic Buddhist monks. So, Yes, I'll probably move on after this Vassa, maybe to another country, to Sri Lanka, I should think, because I haven't been there and it's a Buddhist country and it's quite nearby. Or I go back to Thailand. But as I've just come from Thailand, and then eventually I'd have to, actually I can stay in Thailand because the visa thing is not so difficult there, but it would be useful for my practice from that grazing point of view, from the flock, to be able to continue the fresh nutrient ground of experience in order to maintain my practice and the energy and enthusiasm within that. I spoke of meditation and the 5 hindrances last time, and that third hindrance is of tiredness, that lethargy towards practice. You see, staying in one spot, that can often settle in quite easily. You'll often find in big monasteries, city monasteries, after the mealtime, lots of monks, they don't sleep much, so they'll have a nice rest in the afternoon. If you're out and about wandering, you might be fortunate to find a place to do that, but generally not. You can sit and practice meditation because you're alert. No one, if you're sitting like this, wherever you are, in the middle of a city, in the middle of a town, even in a foreign, different religion temple, you can go to a Hindu temple, you can go to a church in the UK, or what do they call them in Catholic churches? I don't know. Any religious organization that's got its doors open, a Buddhist monk or any wandering ascetic, if you go and sit in meditation, nobody's going to bat an eyelid or ask you to move on. If you go down and lay on the pews and have a doze, that's another matter. Hey, come on, not in here. Off you go, tramp. But I am a tramp. But if I'm sitting in meditation, it's okay to be a tramp like this. Because I'm a content tramp. I haven't got a begging bowl out. Not after 12, only in the morning, just at dawn, I have my bowl. For food only, not money. Then the bowl goes away, and I sit like this. And I can do that anywhere. And this skill has been developed in monasteries and outside, traveling. So this is not wanderlust. Lust is desire, is thirst, is tanha, that I'm working on fighting, my battle against. The desire, say, I could just disrobe and then I could do anything I like, couldn't I? Travel the world, go to all of the tourist places, go to the holiday destinations, as opposed to I avoid the holiday destinations because I'm a monk and don't want to be on beaches where there are bikini-clad ladies or swimming, volleyball and water sports and such like going, and music and bars. I don't go to those places, you see. I would only go to empty, desolate beaches where nobody goes to. There are many of them. I don't know why they don't go to them, but I do know why, because there are no bars and no music and no volleyball and no water sports. There's just sea, rocks, or sea and sand. There are these places, beautiful, paradise places, but people are not happy to stay in a place like that for very long. They soon want to have something to eat, something to drink. They need the facilities of comfortable toilets or a bedroom with a comfortable bed. But if you're a practicing renunciant ascetic samana, you don't need these things. You can stay on these abandoned empty beaches, forests, as the Buddha said, in an open space, under a tree, in a cave or an empty building. There are many empty buildings where I've stayed. When I return to Thailand, I'll probably do that too. I did start off, but then I moved into the monastery and stayed there, where I learned so much. It was very beneficial. But whether I wanted to become more of a part and stay in that community, I probably can say I didn't, because that's why I'm here now. Otherwise I would have stayed there for the Vassa. But I was getting settled in, establishing myself, becoming part of community living. And then with me, that third hindrance, lethargy, can set in. I can start to think, same thing day in, day out. I'll just have a rest now and then meditate 3 hours this afternoon, and it can go like that. Some of the best meditation experiences I've had have been in the most unlikely places. Not peaceful, secluded meditation centres in cells of full sensory deprivation. No, not at all. They've been in very, very either wild situations, nature-wise, or quite wild in terms of urban-wise. Very busy railway stations, busy airports, in terrible transportation situations. Not so much transportation situations, but certainly samadhi meditation comes into its being in such places, because you can protect yourself from all that seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and go inside where there is peace and tranquility and calmness of mind always. This is our refuge in this Buddha, our teacher, not a God. He's past, he's dead, he's gone. Parinibbana. He's attained to the final nibbana, never to be reborn. This is parinibbana through his enlightenment. But he's left his legacy of the teachings, the Dharma, and this bunch of monks and nuns, these samanas, to pass on that. But, like in this fourth heavenly messenger, the samana that showed the Buddha there is an alternative. We lead simple lives of the renunciant. We don't live in palaces or shouldn't. We don't drive cars or shouldn't. We don't use and receive money or shouldn't. We shouldn't live like that. We should set the example as the alternative to household life, not a comparison to household life, the alternative to household life, which is without all mod cons, without those luxuries that one would come to expect in this day and age in the normal household existence. I mean, I quite radically shy away from those things. When I stay in England, the only person's house I'm allowed to stay in as a lay person for any length of time, and this is officially within the rules, is my mother's house. Because my mother, I'm allowed to stay with her if she was ill, to look after her, but even if she's not, you're allowed as a monk to stay in your mother's house, as long as there's nobody other people staying there. That is okay, under the same roof. Other than that, we're not allowed to stay in a hotel because we're under the same roof as other women, other lay people. It's under the same roof. I know many people do stay in lodgings, places where there's all mixtures of sexes and this, that and the other, but in the strict view of the rules, this is not really, shouldn't be done. This is why I usually stay outside or in an empty building, a hut, cave, or under a tree. Not because it's just what the Buddha taught, but he taught that for a very practical reason, so that we're not mixing with lay people, or specifically as monks, lay women, or specifically as nuns, lay men, because this is going to only create difficulty in the mind, even if not by actions, through restraint. It's there, a thought, a possibility, something one can guard oneself against. So even staying with my mother, I stay in a tent. That's same tent, actually, similar tent. That's been all over the place. It's not exactly the same tent, it's the same type, but I have various, they cost about the equivalent of £7 in UK money, which is very little, 700 rupees. Yeah. So I have them dotted in various places as an alternative place to sleep. And when I'm at my mother's, whatever the weather, that's where I sleep, in her garden. Because I feel that's better for my practice than where there's the TV, the refrigerator, all of the accessories, the bathrooms and this and that people have come to expect in this day and age. So avoiding that, I stay in my tent. So wherever I am, I'm in the same place. Wherever I am, I'm doing the same thing. Wherever I am, it's the same routine. And why? Because wherever you go, wander lost or not, you're not going to get away from your suffering. Wherever you are, it comes with you. You take it with you because that is inside. It's in that tanha, that desire for something. That desire not to have something you don't want, or that desire to have something you want. So we don't go seeking it. We abandon that lust. We just wander expecting nothing. One of the biggest problems we have is expectation, because what is that? That is quantifying desire. It's giving you hope, and hope also should be abandoned. Just expect nothing and enjoy what you have in this very moment, here and now, where you are. Because whatever you do, you get on a jumbo jet and you fly to the Caribbean and you spend a month on a tropical island. You will still be there, it will still be here, it will still be now. And in each and every breath, there is that delicious, enjoyable, happy quality of metta, loving kindness, of karuna, compassion for all beings, of mudita, of joy for all beings, others. And from that we build equanimity, upekkha, that unreactiveness, but can also be described as the ultimate contentment of not having to think things should be another way than they are. Because the way they are is the truth. It is the Four Noble Truths. The truth of suffering, end of suffering. Truth of suffering, cause of suffering, end of suffering, path leading to the end of suffering. So in our meditation, we breathe in knowing this. We breathe out knowing that. And through this practice, in each and every day, wherever we are, whether we stay in one place or whether we move on, if we maintain this consistency of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, we do undermine, we do eradicate those root defilements of greed, hatred and delusion, and ultimately become desireless or content. And contentment is how we become, or how we are happy. Happiness is a symptom of contentment. And our sadness only comes from discontentment, through not being content. So this is how, as samanas, whether we're wandering or staying in a monastery, this is how we practice towards this aim, to become free from suffering in this lifetime. But without expectation. And as lay people also, you can do the same. Practice meditation, but also build that firm foundation, that basis of sila, moral virtue. And by doing this, you will develop those wholesome mind states. You will start and begin to know, without doubt, understand impermanence, anicca. Know without doubt and understand suffering, dukkha. And know without doubt and understand that you are only as a result of the causes and conditions that surround you, that to some extent you're responsible for putting in place. But that is not you. What is you is what observes all that's going on, all you're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, these experiences. And then how you react to those or don't react to those is a measure of how far you've got on this path. Happily, I hope, towards Nibbana. So for today, I think I should leave it just there, or just that, and I hope there's something useful. Once again, I apologize for the interruption. This time I did manage to pause the recording, so the interruption shouldn't have been as long as it actually was. But for me, it was okay. Now I'll go and make friends with them outside. Hopefully there's something useful there, in which case please hope you can use it. And if not, just let it go. And it's another experience. Thank you for watching.